2026, a doorway opens, a gateway into the heart of biblical prophecy, and the world is invited. This July 8th through 11th, 2026 in St. Louis, Missouri, the Eschatology of the Prophets Gateway Conference brings together some of the most respected voices in fulfilled prophecy studies, featuring Dr. Don K. Preston, Dr. William Bell Jr., Zach Davis, Pastor Michael Miano, Tim Martin, Pastor Steve Magua, and more guest speakers to be announced. 4 days of revelation, 4 days of powerful teaching, 4 days that will reshape how you understand the prophets from Genesis to Revelation. Only 100 tickets are available, and when they're gone, they're gone. Secure your spot today at www.thewellchurchstl.com/events. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Step through the gateway. More information is available at www.beyondcreationscience.com. July 8th through 11th, 2026, St. Louis, Missouri. The Gateway Conference. Enter the conversation. Experience the revelation.
Good afternoon, and God bless you. Happy Friday and a happy weekend to you. Welcome to another session of Ask the Pastor Bible Study. My name is Steve Magua. I am a covenant creation full preterist Christian. That's why there is that tag under my name. I believe in covenant creation. I believe in full preterism, but most importantly, I believe in Jesus Christ. Jesus is God, the incarnate God. Jesus is the Son of God, so he is not the Father. Jesus Christ died upon the cross and he rose up on the third day. Jesus Christ returned the second time within a generation of his death and resurrection. The second coming is in our past. The first heaven and the first earth and the sea passed away in 70 AD. We live in the New Jerusalem, which is in the new heavens and the new earth, which is the new covenant. That has been around for over 1970 years. This is what it means to be a covenant creation full preterist. Now, the topic that I want to discuss this afternoon is end times as eschatology must be understood according to the old covenant. The end times must be understood according to the old covenant. End times cannot possibly be understood from a 21st century mindset. That is called eisegesis. There is no way you can take what people think the end times are today and make it the meaning of the end times. The end times are not determined by what people believe today. Now, is it possible that people today can believe the correct things about the end times? Yes, but only if the understanding of the person who is looking at it today is the same exact understanding as that of Moses, as that of the prophets of the Old Testament, as that of the apostles of the New Testament, and most importantly, your understanding of the end times must exactly be the same as that of Jesus Christ. If your understanding of end times is not at all like that of Jesus, your understanding is invalid. Your understanding does not count. So that's what I want us to look at this afternoon. Of course, this is a live broadcast. This is a discussion broadcast. I do welcome questions. I do welcome comments. I do welcome objections, so long as they are brought forth in courtesy. So, why is it that I say that end times must be understood from the context of the Old Covenant? Let me give you the first scripture here. Go with me, if you will, to Matthew chapter 24 and go with me to verse number 15. Matthew 24, verse 15. I'm going to put it on the screen and let's talk about one of the main events, as most of us know, that has to do with the end times. Okay, so here is a text here. It's called the abomination of desolation. I'm pretty sure you can even see it when my face is bigger like that, right? The abomination of desolation. You cannot have the end times apart from the abomination of desolation. Agreed? I hope you do agree, right? Now, many of you, if you are like me, you are raised up to believe that the abomination of desolation is going to happen in your future. Well, let's see what Jesus will say about it. This is Matthew 24, the red words of Jesus. You cannot understand the end times apart from the old covenant. So, Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel. Now, I want to make sure, Rodney, is my mic coming through clearly? Rodney, if you can help me to confirm that my mic is coming through clearly, because earlier on I had done a broadcast and I was told by some people, we can't hear you. What's going on with your mic? And so I just want to make sure. So if you can just comment there, if you are watching together with Rodney and you are able to do so, please tell me if my mic can be heard. He says it is too low. Okay. What about now, Rodney? I'm going to get closer to my mic. What about now? Is it better now? Let me make sure that I go to my audio. I am at the highest point of my mic, so I cannot do any louder than that. If I do any louder than that, I'll be yelling, and I don't want to be yelling. Megs Overcomer on Facebook. Can you hear me clearly? D. Wainab says, I hear you. Thank you, D. Wainab. Thank you very much for confirming that. I just don't want to produce low quality content. I don't think it's edifying for anyone. So that's why I asked those questions. So thank you for helping me out here. So Jesus is talking about the abomination of desolation. And I want to show, throughout this broadcast, I will show that if your understanding of the end times is in any way contrary to that of the old covenant, your perspective of the end times is invalid. It is not biblical. So end times is defined by the old covenant. The New Testament only defines the end times according to the old covenant. Look at Jesus. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So Jesus tells you that his basis for teaching about the abomination of desolation is based on Daniel. Which means if you want to understand the abomination of desolation and the things pertaining to the abomination of desolation, Jesus says you have to read Daniel. You have to understand what Daniel says. You have to understand what Daniel says. So do you see? Here is another one. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples to show you that you cannot possibly understand the things pertaining to the end times if you ignore or if you are unfamiliar with the old covenant, with the Old Testament. Let's go to another one. Matthew chapter 5. Matthew 5 and verse number 17. Very familiar passage. Matthew 5 and verse number 17. Look at what he says. Jesus. I'm talking about Jesus right now. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law and of course the prophets until all of it is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the list of these commandments of the law and the prophets and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So can you see, already Jesus is telling you, whatever I am going to fulfill, whatever I am doing is based on the law and the prophets. You cannot understand the resurrection. You cannot understand the so-called rapture. You cannot understand the Antichrist, the beasts of Revelation, apart from the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is the context that the New Testament writers, the New Testament apostles, and Jesus Christ himself is basing their teachings on. So therefore, when it comes to the timing and the nature and the audience, the target of the prophecies, they are defined by the Old Testament, not by the church creeds that were made long after the Bible had been made. So the Apostles' Creed has nothing to tell you about the end times. The Nicene Creed, the Chalcedonian Creed, they can tell you nothing about the end times. They can add nothing to your understanding of the end times. The London Baptist faith statement of 1791, it cannot teach you about the end times. If you want to understand the end times, you must understand the end times according to the Old Testament. Look at what the writer of Hebrews says. Hebrews chapter number 1. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, God has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom he also created the world. So the writer of Hebrews wants his Hebrew Christian people to understand, listen, anything that I'm going to teach you in this book of Hebrews is based on what God said to our fathers through the prophets. And by the way, Brother Willie Jackson, welcome. It is good to have you here. What a joy. What an honor to have a man of God like yourself here. Amen. And of course, Rodney, let me recognize you. You have been such a good friend. You have been such a great supporter. I truly honor you. Every one of you that is here. Guys, please hit that share button. Let others know, because I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor. I've been a teacher of the word for 18 years now, since the year 2008. This is 2026. So in July this year, I'll be actually 18 years this January, because I really came into Christ in June of 2007, and by the next year in January, I was already in the gospel. I was already in the ministry. I was already in Bible school. I was ordained in 2009. Not that that makes me anything, but I've been doing this a while. But until 2019, I used to believe that Jesus is coming soon in my near future. The Antichrist was alive. You know, Israel was the time clock of God. How many of you have had such statements? God is fulfilling prophecies right now, according to Ezekiel 37:38, Iran, Iraq war, Gaza. I did not know. I did not know better. So please share with somebody that they hopefully can also have their eyes opened, such as we have had our eyes opened. We are not here to contradict the church. We are not here to contradict the gospel. We are here to magnify the gospel. So, dear friends, when you are looking at the scriptures, when you're looking at Revelation, when you're looking at Matthew 24, when you're looking at 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, the rapture passage in 1st Thessalonians chapter 4, 1 Corinthians 15, you know, that twinkling of an eye, that last trump, it is all based in the old covenant. Every single thing. The 7 bowls of wrath come right out of Leviticus 26. How can you understand the 7 bowls of wrath in Revelation if you have not read Leviticus 26? How can you understand the great tribulation in Matthew 24, Mark 13 and Luke 21 if you don't know what Deuteronomy 32 says about it. Jesus and the apostles are simply quoting the Old Testament. They are saying God's promises made to Old Covenant Israel and to the Old Testament saints that lived before Old Covenant Israel are being fulfilled in the last days, which were in the first century. So get this. I'm going to bring up this scripture again. In these last days, the statement in these last days. Let's begin there. What are the last days? What are the end times? The writer of Hebrews tells you he, and his audience are in the last days. So the last days are to be found in the lifetime of the writer of Hebrews. But he compares them with the days of our fathers. So I want to say to you that the last days are the last days of the first days. The last days have a beginning. So if you want to know what the last days are, find out what the first days are. In the same way, if I told you, well, dear friends, we are in the beginning right now. We are in the beginning. We are not at the end. If I said that, immediately you would at least ask some question. You would say, what do you mean we are in the beginning? In the beginning of what? And I would say to you, well, we're in the beginning of 2026. And you would not argue about that, would you? But if I told you we are in the last days of 2026, you would say, hold up, brother. Are you counting time the way it is counted on a regular basis, or are you using the Ethiopian calendar? Or are you using the Chinese calendar? What calendar are you using? If I told you I'm using the Gregorian calendar, you'd have to object and say, no, we are not in the last days of 2026. We are in the first days of 2026. So here in Hebrews chapter number 1, it gives you a framework. It tells you that the Old Testament were the first days, and the days of the writer of Hebrews and his audience are the last days. I want to propose to you quite emphatically that we in 2026 are not living in the last days that the writer of Hebrews is referencing. The writer of Hebrews tells you they are living in the last days. What characterizes the last days? How do we know whether we are in the last days or not? Hebrews chapter number 9 will tell you. Hebrews chapter number 9. Okay. Now, I'm going to move rather quickly here because I want to show you that the last days are based on the Old Covenant. The Old Covenant days are the first days. We are not living in the last days because the first days and the last days all pertain to the Old Covenant. The first days and the last days all belong to the Old Covenant system. I think I'll repeat it once more. The first days and the last days all fall within the Old Covenant. Watch this. I'm going to read a couple verses. Is it okay if we just read the Bible? Just a couple verses, not cherry pick. Read with its context. Now, even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. For a tent was prepared. The first section, please pay to the sections because they will become very important in identifying which days we are in. For a tent was prepared, the first section, in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. The first section is called the holy place. Remember, we just read in Matthew 24, just in case you don't connect, because I want you to make sure that you connect. In Matthew 24, verse number 15, Jesus just told his disciples, in verse number 15, what is a relationship? He says, so when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, that's the same holy place that the writer of Hebrews is referring to. It is called the holy place. So the abomination of desolation, which triggers the great tribulation, happens in the holy place of the first covenant. Oh, I hope somebody catches it. I hope somebody grasps it, that the abomination of desolation happens in the context of the first covenant. The first covenant is the old covenant. There is no place called the holy place today. There is no place called the holy place today, because that belongs to the first covenant. So even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. For a tent was prepared, the first section, in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. Notice that at the time that the writer of Hebrews is writing, that place was still existing. He writes it, he doesn't say it was called the way we would say today. He says it is presently called the holy place because it exists in Jerusalem. Behind the second curtain was a second section called the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna. What is it? Manna simply means, what is it? The Israelites in the wilderness didn't know what was falling from the sky. It looked white. So they say, what is it? That's the meaning of the word manna. What is it? And Aaron's staff that budded, the tree of life. Aaron's staff that budded represented the tree of life inside the ark of the covenant. And the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory, overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. These preparations having thus been made, the priests of Levi, the priests of Aaron, go regularly into the first section. What is the name of the first section? The holy place. That's the name of the first section. But let's go back to Hebrews. So they go regularly into the first section. Why is it that the Old Testament is the context of the end times? You must understand this. So the priests regularly go into the first section called the holy place, performing their ritual duties. But into the second section, the most holy place, only the high priest goes. And he but once a year, and not without taking blood, with which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. Verse 8. Verse 8. By this, what is by this? By this ritual, where the holy place only the priest can go, the most holy place only the high priest can go. By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy place, says, two of them, holy place, most holy place, is not yet opened as long as the first section is still standing. Now remember again, what is the first section? The first section is called the holy place. The first section is called the holy place. It is the old covenant temple in Jerusalem that existed until 70 AD, that existed at the time of Jesus's ministry, that existed throughout the book of Acts. There was a place called the holy place. The holy place is where the abomination of desolation was to take place. The abomination of desolation must take place while the holy place is still standing. The writer of Hebrews tells you that as long as the holy place is still standing, which is symbolic, which symbolizes, which indicates that you are still in the present age, then he says, according to this arrangement given under the old covenant, gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshipper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, ceremonial laws, regulations for the body imposed until the time of the Reformation, until the time of the new heavens and the new earth. So reformation here refers to the establishment of a new temple, a new way of worship. So until the new heavens and the new earth were established, until the new temple started operating, the old covenant temple must continue operating. And God continues to honor the activities in the old covenant temple. And God continues to dwell in the most holy place of the old covenant temple. This is absolutely critical to understand that in the old covenant, God established a system of worship, a system of coming before his presence. And in this system of coming before his presence, the 12 tribes of Israel could only come as far as the outer court. In the outer court, only the one tribe that belongs to God, the Levites, could serve in the sacrificial system. And out of this one tribe, the Levites, only the sons of Aaron could serve as priests inside the holy place. And only Aaron or his successor could enter into the most holy place. This was the system that God established. And this system, we are told in Hebrews, would continue to exist, would continue to operate until the time of the Reformation. Please note once again, let me make it as big as I can make it. By the way, I hope you guys can see Don Preston above me, Zach Davis behind me. What is all that? Well, all that has to do with our eschatology of the prophets July conference in 2026, which I hope that many of you will be able to attend in person, fellowship together, worship the Lord together, sing together, talk with one another, get to know one another. I hope that you can come. If you want to be a part of that, please go to www.thewellchurchstl.com/events. You'll be able to register right there. The tickets are getting sold out pretty soon. Okay, so let's go back to our text. So it tells you here in the book of Hebrews that the sacrifices that cannot perfect the worshiper, but only deal with food laws, drink offerings, various washings, regulations for the body of God's people, the body of Moses, imposed, ordained by God until the time of reformation. The word reformation is a compound word. It means forming again. Forming again. Recreation. That's exactly what you find in the book of Revelation, which I'm going to open up now. Revelation chapter 21. What is happening in Revelation chapter 21? It's recreation. It's reformation. Watch this. Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven, Genesis 1:1, and the first earth, Genesis 1:2, had passed away, and the sea, Genesis 1:2, was no more. So reformation happens in Revelation 21, verse 1. Hebrews chapter number 9 tells you that sacrifices of the Old Testament, the whole system of the Old Testament, including the temple, continues. Let's begin here once again. I want you to see that from verse number 6, these preparations, having thus been made by God, the priests go regularly into the first section, performing their ritual duties, but into the second section, the Holy of Holies, only the high priest goes, and he but once a year, and not without taking blood, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. By these, the Holy Spirit, which was given after the ascension of Christ, indicates presently that the way into the holy places is not yet opened as long as the first section is still standing. Don Preston taught about this in the Montana conference. We had an eschatology of, I wonder if my hat is here, eschatology of Genesis. Here's my eschatology of Genesis hat, which, by the way, even my t-shirt is the eschatology of Genesis. We had an eschatology of Genesis teaching at the Montana conference. In July, we are going to do the eschatology of the prophets, which is part of what I'm teaching right now. But you're going to have different teachers teaching it from what they have learned, and they are probably way more advanced than I am. But the point is this, that the end times pertain to the ending, to the destruction, to the removal of the old covenant system of worship. That's what the end times are about. The end times are the time when the old system of worship is removed completely and a new way of worship is established permanently on earth for God's people. That's what the end times are about. The end times are not about the end of time. They are the time of the end of a way of the world, of the way of life as it existed for God's covenant people. So the world of God's covenant people was coming to an end. But the physical world and physical time and history was not coming to an end. It is the old covenant world that was coming to an end, not the physical world. It's the way of the world that was coming to an end. So, but that way comes to an end when, do you see there? He says, so long as the first section still has standing. Don Preston taught us in the summer of 2025 that this word still standing in the Greek, it means still has legal standing. So long as the temple in Jerusalem had legal standing before God, the way into the kingdom, into the holy places of the new heavens and the new earth were not yet available. So when Jesus died and resurrected, having paid the debt owed to the old covenant law, notice Jesus was paying a debt owed to the old covenant law. Jesus went back into heaven to wait until all of the loose ends under the old covenant were tied, to wait until all his enemies under the old covenant were destroyed. Then he would come back to establish the new covenant way of worship. The new covenant temple would be inaugurated at the second coming of Christ. So the end times, the last days, were the last days of the old covenant system, not the last days of America, not the last days of history, not the last days of time itself. Because God promised the old covenant people that in the future I will establish my presence with you on earth forever and ever. Ezekiel chapter number 37 from verse 26 to 28. And Jesus says, I have come to fulfill all those promises. So what I want to show you here is that according to Hebrews 9, while the first section, the Holy of Holies, while the first section called the holy place, rather, not the Holy of Holies, we have already been told here in verse number 2 that the place which has the lampstand, the table, and the bread of the presence is called the holy place. This place, so long as it is still standing, the way into the new heaven and new earth, New Jerusalem, was not yet open. This is the same place that Matthew 24 says that Daniel prophesied there would be an abomination of desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place. Do you see then, I hope, that for the end times to happen, the Old Testament temple still needs to be standing. And the rituals and the sacrifices and the activities of the Old Testament temple must be in flux when the end times are happening. When the last days are happening, the Old Testament temple must be standing. The Levitical priest must be practicing the Levitical order. Animal sacrifices must be going on. Allow me to take you here to Daniel. Go with me to Daniel, if you will. Daniel chapter 12. Daniel 12. You cannot understand the Great Tribulation. You cannot understand the second coming, abomination of desolation, apart from Daniel 12. If you are teaching any of these things, if you are understanding any of these things outside of the Old Covenant, you are wrong. Not because I say so, but because Jesus says so. Because Paul says so. Because John says so. Because the Bible says so. Welcome, my sisters Shizna and Laria, my brother Silas Oriedo. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. So, watch this. Daniel 12. The time of the end. Notice the title is not the end of time. It is the time of the end. We just had the time of the end of 2025 2 weeks ago. When somebody told you it is the time of the end of 2025, you didn't think time was coming to an end, did you? You knew it is the particular period called 2025 that was coming to an end. So at that time, Daniel writes, Jesus just told us, if you want to understand the abomination of desolation, the end times, understand Daniel. So let's look at Daniel. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble. Shall be a time of trouble, such as has never been since there was a nation till that time. Have you ever heard of that before? It's called the Great Tribulation. So Daniel is in the right cul-de-sac, the right roundabout that Jesus is talking about in Matthew 24. So there's a time of trouble such as has never been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time, your people shall be delivered. Whose people? Daniel's people. What about Americans? What about Africans? What about Australians? Any Australians in the house? Oh, my friend Don Stead is here from down under. What about them? Are they going to be saved at that last time? Because this is saying at that time your people shall be delivered. What about everybody else in the world? Everybody else in the world is not a part of this matrix. Why? Because salvation, biblical soteriology, biblical salvation pertains to the Old Covenant. Let me say it again. Biblical salvation belongs to the Old Covenant, not to the New Covenant. Let me explain. You see, the word salvation is used throughout the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation with reference to the wrath of God being poured out on the day of the Lord. Everybody should be able to say amen to that. Yes, that's what the Bible talks about. On the day of the Lord, which is the day of wrath, which is the day of judgment, that's when you needed to be saved. In fact, even before we understood this, that's what we believed, that the last day was in our future. Everybody believes that salvation gets completed on the last day, the second coming. So this should not be news to anyone. Or what should be news to you is that the day of judgment, the last day, happens in the Old Covenant. It never happens at the end of the New Testament. For the New Covenant has no end. The kingdom of Christ has no end. But the Old Testament has an end. The Old Covenant has an end. On the last day of the Old Covenant, God was going to bring the accountability for everything written in the Old Covenant. The day of judgment is the day in which people were to be judged according to what was written in the books. Revelation 20:13. And I ask you, have you ever tried to figure out which books? Laria. He says, anyone whose name was not found written in the books was judged according to what was written in the books, plural. Which books? Well, the books of the Old Testament, the books of the law. So you need to understand that the day of judgment is a day of judgment according to the Old Covenant. It is an Old Covenant judgment. It is not a New Covenant judgment. There is no such thing as a New Covenant judgment. Because according to the New Covenant, the terms of the New Covenant says, I will forgive their iniquities and I will remember their sins no more. The day of judgment in Revelation 20, just like the day of judgment in any other part of the Old Testament, is the day in which God remembers all the iniquities of Israel, all the iniquities of Jerusalem, all the iniquities of the apostate, the rebels. He remembers. He does not forget. Is the last day of the Old Covenant. So, but at that time, your people, Israel, shall be saved. The word delivered means saved. So here is another way of saying this. But at that time, all Israel shall be saved. Have you ever heard that before? That's Romans 11. Paul says, all Israel shall be saved. Do you mean all Israelites without distinction? No. Everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. This is the basis of Revelation chapter 20. John does not just come up with a book of life. John is reading Daniel 12. There is a book of life in Daniel 12. And anyone who is found written in the book is saved. Whoever is not written in the book will be judged. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, not all, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above. And those who turn many to righteousness shall shine like the stars forever and ever. That's on earth. But you, Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book until the time of the end. Not until the end of time, until the time of the end. Guys, if you have a question as I'm going along, I am willing to answer questions live. If any of you say, can I come live and ask you a question? You don't have to have a camera. All you have to do is have a mic, that which is on your phone. Just tell me in the comment section, say, can you bring me on? I'll send you a link. I'll bring you to the studio. You'll ask your question. I'll drop you out of the studio. I'll answer your question. I don't mind being asked questions. So until the time of the end of what? The end of the sacrificial system. Look, according to the arrangement given by God in the Old Testament, gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshipper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, which are regulations of the Old Testament for the body of Moses, for the body of Adam, for the body of the Old Covenant people, imposed by Yahweh until the time of the reformation of the world. Reformation of the world. That's what we just saw in Revelation 21. The reformation is Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. The world was reformed at Revelation 21, verse 1. The world is reformed at the end of the sacrificial system. The world is reformed at the end of the sacrificial system. Let's confirm this in Daniel. So Daniel 12 goes, he says, these things are sealed until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others. He had been talking with one person all the way from Daniel 10. But now he sees two others on this bank of the stream and on that bank of the stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders. So how long until the end times are completed? The answer is given in verse 7. And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times and half a time, 3.5 times. 3.5 times. That's how long it would all take. So the end times don't last tens of thousands of years. They don't last thousands of years or even hundreds of years. They last exactly 3.5 times, which is understood even by all scholars who know anything about anything, that actually adds up to 3.5 years. The whole end times activities of Daniel 12, which includes the abomination of desolation, the great tribulation, the great salvation, and the great resurrection of God's people, 4 things all take place within a 3.5 year period of time. 1290 or 1260 days, 42 months. That's exactly how long the end times take place. Does it make sense? The end times happen over a 3.5 year period of time. You will see that in a moment. So he says it would be for time, times, and half a time, and that when the shattering, very important word, when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. So the final sign that the great tribulation is over, the great deliverance is complete, the great resurrection is complete, is that there is a shattering of the power of the holy people. That's how you know that it's complete. Hold on 1 second, guys. Just 1 second. All right, bye. So, when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. So how do I know the resurrection is over? I need to look for the destruction of the power of the holy people. If you don't know what that is referring to, dear friends, I can show it to you very quickly. In Matthew 24, the destruction of the power of the holy people is found in verse number 2. It is described by Jesus in very clear, explicit, and ambiguous terms. What is the destruction of the power of the holy people? They asked him. He was going away. Jesus left the temple. He was going away when the disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, you see all this? Where God meets people, where God forgives sins? You see all this, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be torn down. This is the place that had the Ark of the Covenant. This is the place where atonement happened once a year. This is the place where sacrifices happened every day. This is where the power of God was headquartered and centered under the Old Covenant. Jesus says nothing will remain here. It will all be obliterated out of existence. Daniel tells you that when you see that, when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. So, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem is the sign that the Son of Man has come, brought judgment, and resurrected his people. That's a sign of the Son of Man. Notice that in Matthew 24, the disciples ask him 3 questions. Tell us, when will these things be that pertain to the destruction of the power of the holy people? What will be the sign of your coming? How shall we know it is done? end of the age. Hebrews told us in verse number 8, as long as the first section is standing, which symbolizes, which indicates the present age, so the end of the age cannot happen while the holy place is still standing. Cannot happen. But when the holy place falls, end of age, resurrection, second coming. Boom. You cannot understand these things if you ignore Daniel 12. If you ignore Daniel 12, you must make up fantastical Hollywood stories about how Jesus is going to descend out of the atmosphere. Particularly, he must come to America and Europe. Have you ever noticed, by the way, that even when people are thinking about the rapture, they're thinking about the rapture, it has to be centered in America. It has to be centered in Europe. Because it's all made up. The rapture that people are hacking on all the time today, oh, the rapture is about to happen, don't be left behind. It's all nonsensical Hollywood propaganda. It's made up. Totally made up. Totally made up. Nothing like that will ever happen. Nothing like that ever happened, nor will ever happen. Why? Because it's not in the Old Covenant. Listen to me. Here's a principle. If you want to prove anything at all in the Bible, find it in the Old Testament. If it is not in the Old Testament, it does not exist. Can I repeat that again? You want to find anything. You want to find the devil. You want to find the Antichrist. You want to find hell. You want to find the Messiah. You want to find the resurrection. If it is not in the Old Covenant, it does not exist. It does not exist. And whatever the Old Covenant says about it, that's what it is. So you want to find a devil who is an angel, who has a tail, who has horns, go find him in the Old Testament. If you cannot find him in the Old Testament, you can be sure that somebody made him up by misinterpreting the New Testament scriptures. The hell that people are so adamant about, it's not in the Old Testament. It does not exist. Just does not exist. The end times that are in people's minds that have to do with modern Israel and America and Europe, it does not exist. It's made up. It's a lie. Everything is based on the Old Testament scriptures. Pastor Royal Given said the other day, the Old Testament is the context for which the New Testament finds its content. What a mouthful of words. The Old Testament scriptures are the context which form the content of the New Testament. So the New Testament tells you nothing new, absolutely nothing new, nothing. The New Testament finds all of its context in the Old Testament, and that's where it finds its content. Every single line of the New Testament is based on the Old Covenant promises. And there are no Old Covenant promises for the church apart from Israel. The church does not have its own gap where nobody could see it. No, the church is the reformed Old Covenant Israel. The church is the reformed Old Covenant Israel. The renewed Old Covenant Israel. The church is the wife of God from the Old Testament who is remarried. Yes, brother Jeremy, I agree with you there about the book of Enoch. So Daniel is told that when the shattering of the power, which is the temple of the holy people, comes to an end, all these things will be finished. 70 AD. But I heard, but I did not understand, he says. Then I said, oh my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Let me invite a friend of mine, Apostle Patrick PK, and his sister, because they are good friends of mine. I don't want them to miss out. So it says the words are shut up until the time of the end. If the words are shut up until the time of the end, why is Jesus referring to those words in Matthew 24 verse 15? If the time of the end is in our future, why is Jesus talking about the abomination of Daniel, or spoken by Daniel 2,000 years ago? Why would Jesus be referring to something that is sealed until the time of the end in the first century, if the end times were 2,000 years to the future? Is anybody understanding the basis of my question? The words of Daniel are shut up until the time of the end. Right? And we will see here that Daniel in verse number 11 will talk about the abomination that makes desolate. But Jesus refers to it in Matthew 24. So what does that tell you about the times of Jesus? If the words of Daniel are shut up until the time of the end, Daniel 12:9, Daniel, the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. When you hear somebody unseal them, know you are at the time of the end. That tells you that Jesus and his disciples lived at the time of the end. But we want to find out the end of what? Let's go on reading. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. Verse 11. And from, so this is you're going to be given bookends of time. From to, watch. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days, 3.5 years. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days. But go your way till the end. So from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away till the end is 1,290 days. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away. Remember in Hebrews chapter 9, he says, according to this arrangement, gifts and regular sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, regulations imposed until the time of Reformation. So the regular burnt offerings belong to the first heaven and the first earth. They belong to the end times. Animal sacrifices. So when animal sacrifices end, that is the end of the end times. The end times end at the end of the sacrifices. Daniel chapter number 12. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days, 3.5 years. If you take 1,290 days and divide it by the number of months that make up a year, or days that make up a year, you will find that it is 3.5 years. 3.5 times. So he's just confirming what he was told in verse number 7. Remember when he was told that it would be for 8 times and half a time? That's the same exact number here. 1,290 days. So when will the regular burnt offerings come to an end so that we can know when the end times will end? Because the end of the regular burnt offerings is the time of the end. Listen again to the question. The time of the end is characterized by animal offerings. The end itself is signified by the end of animal offerings. So you cannot be in the last days if there are no animal offerings. You cannot be in the last days if there are no animal offerings going on. That's what identifies the last days. The writer of Hebrews tells us they're in the last days. Hebrews 1:1 and 1:2. Why? How does he know? Because according to Hebrews 9 itself, the last days are characterized by the holy place still standing. The first section must still be standing and operating legally for the last days to be in flux, in force, around. If there is no holy place, if there are no regular burnt offerings, if there are no Levites slaughtering animals, there are no last days. Pastor Eliud, karibu sana. Karibu sana. God bless you, man of God. All the way from Eldoret, the city of champions. If you want to run a marathon, be born in Eldoret. Otherwise, you have no chance. Doesn't matter if you are a Kenyan, if you're not from Eldoret, you cannot win a marathon. I don't know if those of you who are not Kenyans know this. Not all Kenyans can run marathons. You have to come from Eldoret. I don't know why. I think there's something special about the hills of Eldoret. The people in Eldoret, they have lived there for hundreds of years, and their DNA has adapted them to the high altitude and the running in those hills, so that even the greatest of runners from every country now go to train in Eldoret, hoping to at least gain something from that environment. And yet they cannot still beat the people of Eldoret. Just a tidbit of information there. So, the last days of the Bible are characterized by animal sacrifices. So, Israel being formed in 1948 is not at all a sign of the last days. Donald Trump being the president of America does not in any way signify the last days. AI has nothing to do with the last days. Computers have nothing to do with the last days. Islam has nothing to do with the last days. What is it that the Bible says characterizes the last days? Animal sacrifices at Jerusalem, in the holy place. If you don't have that, you don't have end times. Now, somebody might say, well, then we are waiting for the temple to be rebuilt. But here is your problem. The apostles say the last days are already happening in their lifetime. No time are we told that the last days are suspended or paused for another time. The last days continue continuously until the last day. In fact, Hebrews chapter number 10 tells us that the last days were not going to be postponed. Hebrews 10:37. So if somebody told you about the delay of the parousia, they are lying to you through their teeth. Or they just don't know better. But they're still lying to you even if they don't know better. So Hebrews chapter number, let's just begin at verse 4. For you had compassion, he tells them, on those in prison. This is Matthew 25 stuff. And you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves, Hebrews, had a better possession and an abiding one. They knew something was coming that was going to abide on the earth. That's why they accepted for their physical property to be taken away, because something was coming to the earth that was better than their properties that were taken away. Therefore, do not, he tells them, throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that you, when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while. Micron, chronos, micron. Chronos micron. A little while. Chronos is time. Micron, little. For yet a little while. So when the writer of Hebrews is writing, there only remained a little while. A little while, not thousands of years. The writer of Hebrews is writing to encourage them. Hang in there. It's about to happen. The day is about to happen. He will say that later on, earlier on in verse number 26. Yet a little while, and the coming one will come. You see what the little while is for in Hebrews 10? The writer of Hebrews is a prophet. Either he's a prophet or he's a charlatan. See, charlatans like Prophet Owor and many others, John Hagee and many others, they keep telling people, it's about to happen, and then it never happens. And then they die. John Hagee is going to die before any of his false prophecies come to pass. Prophet Owor is going to die before any, not a single one of his prophecies is going to come to pass. Prophet Branham died without a single one of his prophecies coming to pass. That he told people, God has sent me to prepare you because he's going to do it while I'm alive. They die while none of their prophecies have come to pass, proving that they are false prophets anyway. John Hagee is just a bad prophet as Prophet Owor, as Branham, as Benny Hinn. False prophets to the boot. And I am sorry if that hurts your feelings if you follow some of these men. If it does hurt your feeling, I hope that it is enough of an impetus to make you bolt away from them, because they are false prophets and they are false teachers to the core. Paula White, false prophet to the core, calling angels from Africa. And what a shame that this is a person that the White House has chosen to be the spiritual leader of America. What a shame. Anyway, yet a little while, I am an equal opportunity offender. Yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. If the coming one did not come a little while after the writing of Hebrews, then the writer of Hebrews is a false prophet and the book of Hebrews is a false prophecy. Listen to me carefully. Deuteronomy 18 says, if a prophet says something will happen, that thing must happen within the time and within the nature that the prophet says. Otherwise, you are dealing with a false prophet, and you must not listen to them according to Deuteronomy 18 from verse 20 to 21. Yes, Father's joy. A genuine preacher will offend everyone around them, because everyone has things, including themselves. I offend myself too, by the way, because there are things that I say and afterwards I'm like, oh, that is so hurtful to me. Because we all hold on to nonsense which we should not. You need to admit that you are holding on to some nonsense which you should not. You are supporting some nonsense from somebody that you should not. And later on, in a very short time, let me tell you something. By next year, and I'm not prophet, by next year, majority of Christians in the United States will be so ashamed of the position they have been taking. Already, the majority of Christians in Kenya are living in shame because of the position they took a while ago. I'm not going to give details. They took a firm position and now they cannot extricate themselves from that position because the unbelievers are saying, this is your God. This is what your God told you to take a stand on. And you're telling us we need to believe in your God. Your God supports wickedness. That's why we all must be humble, including moi. We all must be humble because we make such foolish decisions, every single one of us, in the moment, in the heat of the moment, and we put God's name to it. This is God's chosen one. This is God's chosen plan. And then when it goes to shit, we cannot say anything because we put God's name to it. And God cannot be associated with poop. Come on. It's okay to admit we all make those stupid mistakes in our choices, all of us. I've never found a person who did not make a stupid mistake somewhere. And I'm probably the chief of the maker of these stupid mistakes along the way, especially in politics. I'm learning. I'm not going to put God's name to any of my choices that I make. I'm just going to say, this is my opinion. If it goes bad, don't associate it with my God. This is just me. Anyway, the coming one will not delay. Did he delay? According to Dr. David Jeremiah, according to Perry Stone, according to every popular false prophet of today, Jesus did not come back in the first century because he delayed. According to the recent prophet from South Africa, Malakela, September 23rd, Jesus told me, the Lord told me, he appeared to me. And then afterwards, he decided to delay, to give people more time. No, there is no such thing in the Bible. There is no giving people more time. When he says he will do it, he does it. Otherwise, he is not God at all. It means he did not foresee it. It means he is not omniscient. It means there were extenuating circumstances he did not count on. It's nonsense. Jesus said that all the things, including the abomination of desolation, including the great tribulation in verse 21, which was to happen immediately, which was to be followed immediately by the cosmic signs, which was to be followed immediately by the sign of the Son of Man appearing, which was to be followed by the tribes mourning, which was to be followed by the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, which was going to be followed by the angels gathering his elect from the four winds, which was going to happen within that generation. All the things in Matthew 24 had to happen within the same generation, which includes verse number 2. And what does verse number 2 say? Verse number 2 says, you see all these things, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Matthew 24 says everything in Matthew 24 had to happen together in the same generation. All scholars agree that Matthew 24 is about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, which took place in 70 AD. All scholars. I have not found a scholar that denies that Jesus prophesied that the temple was going to be destroyed within 40 years. But Jesus says that all the things, including the destruction of that temple, were going to happen within the same 40 years. The second coming with trumpets, with angels, must take place by 70 AD, or Jesus is a false prophet. There is no if, buts, end. It is either Jesus came back by 70 AD or Matthew 24 is a false prophecy. So if you are there believing in partial preterism, your Jesus is a false prophet. That's why I cannot stand with partial preterists. Your Jesus is a false prophet, partial preterist. If you are a futurist, your Jesus is definitely a false prophet and a false teacher, because he fulfilled nothing that he said he would fulfill. And therefore, the Orthodox Jews are correct by saying he is in hell. The Jesus of futurism and the Jesus of partial preterism belongs in hell, just as the Talmud says, because he's a false teacher. All false teachers deserve to die. Deuteronomy 18. Everything in Matthew 24 must take place within the same generation. And everything must include the destruction of the temple that stood there in 30 AD. Whoa! Yes. This is not a matter of degrees of opinion. No, a false prophet is a false prophet. A false prophet is not kind of a false prophet. By the way, That's why the false prophets of charismatism, Pentecostalism, which I was raised in, which I know very well, that's why in Pentecostalism there is this doctrine where a prophecy doesn't have to be 100% accurate in charismatism. That's why you can expect that every prophet of charismatism is absolutely a false prophet, because they cannot guarantee 100% of what they say. But Jeremiah, everything he said happened exactly when he said, how he said it would happen. Ezekiel, show me one prophet of the Old Testament whose prophecy did not happen exactly how he said it would happen. One. Not a single one. So if the Old Testament prophets, without being filled by the Holy Spirit like the apostles of Christ, could be 100% accurate, how much more accurate should be the New Testament prophets be? How much more accurate should Jesus be? He is the standard. So end times are defined by the Old Testament, not by the New Testament. The New Testament simply comes to say what was prophesied in the Old Testament is now happening and is about to happen. So Jeremy, you're talking about these snake charmers, right? In West Virginia. Right? Because most of the time that's where I see them, in West Virginia. I don't know why they are mostly in West Virginia. I know they are in many other places, but mostly in America I see them in West Virginia. I don't know why. Those charlatans who bring snakes into the church. First of all, they are dealing with Mark chapter number 16 from verse 15, a passage that was added later. Did you know that that passage about being bitten by snakes was added later? There is unanimous agreement among scholars that that passage did not exist in the original manuscripts. It was added later by some scribe, long after Mark wrote Matthew. So Mark goes up to chapter number 16, I think verse number 14. That's the end of Mark. That's the end of Mark. So the other things, and not to say those other things, particularly the speaking of tongues, of course, is somewhere else, but the catching of snakes, and that was added when somebody read the book of Acts. And so, because only one person that we know in the Bible that was bitten by a snake, that's Paul. But Paul was not going around capturing snakes and walking around with them saying, hey, here, look. That's not even what that verse would mean anyway. Required Mailbox gives a very powerful statement here. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when the desire comes, it is a tree of life. Yes, so I encourage you, Jeremy, to go and study Mark chapter 16. When you get to Mark 16, 15 or 14, around there, you will notice it's usually sectioned off. And they will give a footnote, and they say this passage was not found in the oldest manuscripts. It's just like, where people who send you this chain mail where they say some verses have been taken out of the newer Bibles because they are in the King James. Right? Have you ever heard of that? Oh, there's all these verses that have been taken out. These do not come out by prayer except by prayer and fasting. The verses, wherever you find them taken out in the modern versions, is because they are being honest. They are saying the oldest manuscripts don't have them, but King James is not depending on the oldest manuscripts. King James is depending on the later manuscripts. And that's a very good point, Required Mailbox. That is probably talking about Pharisees, Sadducees. He's not talking about actual cobras and asps and poisonous snakes. But anyway, now we are looking at this statement that I made. End times must be understood according to the Old Covenant. So Daniel 12 is the foundational document for understanding Matthew 24. Daniel 12 tells you that Matthew 24 must be fulfilled at the end of the regular burnt offering system. The abomination of desolation is set up at the same time that the regular burnt offering is taken away. The abomination of desolation happens at the time the regular burnt offering is taken away. The regular burnt offering was taken away in 66 AD by Eleazar, the son of Ananias. Eleazar was the governor of the temple. His father was the high priest. Josephus tells us how he took away the regular burnt offerings. And the taking away of the regular burnt offering in 66 AD by Eleazar and the younger priests is what was the cause of the war between Rome and Jerusalem. It is the beginning of the rebellion. So the taking away of the burnt offerings began a rebellion from the temple, which spread to the rest of the city, which spread throughout Israel, and it caused Nero, the emperor of Rome, to send an army to come and try to retake Israel back, which ended in the destruction of the temple, fulfilling Matthew 24. This is very important. In fact, Paul tells you about the same event in 2 Thessalonians. Look at what Paul is going to do and look at what Paul's basis for 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 is. Paul is not going just to make these things up. Look at what he'll say. So he says, now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, that's the second coming, and our being gathered together to him, we ask you, brothers, not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, either by a spirit or a spoken word, or a letter seeming to be from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one deceive you in any way. Okay, good. We are all very wary of deception. So how do we prevent this deception, Paul? For that day, what day? The day of the coming of the Lord. The day of our being gathered together, the second coming. That day will not come unless the rebellion comes first. The apostasia. And not just the rebellion, and the man of lawlessness is revealed. Two things: the rebellion and the man of lawlessness. Okay. Now Paul is going to concentrate on the man of lawlessness. So he's going to say, because the rebellion, once you understand it, is part of the man of lawlessness's activities. Now watch. So the man of lawlessness is called the son of destruction. Son of destruction? The son of destruction of what? Verse number 7 goes back to the Old Testament. What did verse number 7 say? When somebody asks, how long? How shall we know these things have happened? When the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end. It's called the son of destruction. So the man of lawlessness is the one who causes the shattering of the power of the holy people in Daniel 12. Whoa. Not just that. It is also found in Daniel 9. Because in Daniel 9, chapter number 9 and verse number 27, it says, starting in verse 26 actually, Daniel 9, 26, the 70 weeks. I want to start at 26. After the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. After the 62 weeks, after the crucifixion of Messiah, the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. That's Matthew 24. That's Matthew 24, verse number 2 again. So you cannot understand the New Testament prophets without first of all understanding the Old Testament prophets. He says, you see all this, do not truly, I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. That's the city. That's the sanctuary. That's the temple. So here, Daniel 9 says that its end, the end of the city and the sanctuary, shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. Who? The Prince, Jesus. And for half the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering through his crucifixion. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate. So this is what Paul is referring to, the one who makes desolate, the son of destruction, until the decreed end is poured out on him, the desolator. So when you go back here to Paul, he tells you that the man of lawlessness is the son of destruction, is the cause of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, which we know happened in 70 AD. Paul is not writing about an event in your future. Paul is writing about an event in his future and in the future of the Thessalonians at the time the temple was to be destroyed in fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy in Matthew 24. Paul is a servant of Jesus. Paul is not an entertainer of the American church in the 21st century. Paul is not answering the concerns of the 21st century church. Paul is first and foremost delivering information to people in the first century to align with what Jesus taught in Matthew 24. When Paul teaches about the second coming, he cannot teach you about another second coming different from the one Jesus taught about. And Jesus is telling you, my second coming is based on Daniel and Isaiah 27. So anyway, the son of destruction opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship so that he takes his seat in the temple of God. He takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. He takes his seat in the temple of God. So the man of lawlessness must sit in whose temple? I'm going to come to your question there, Father's Joy. I'm going to ask you a question. I want to ask a question here, and I need an answer from all of you, as many of you that I can. According to the text that I'm going to put in the screen on this side in a moment, whose temple does the man of lawlessness take his seat in? Please be specific. Listen to the question again. Whose temple does the man of lawlessness take his seat in? Okay, let me put it up. So I need answers before I continue. Whose temple? Thank you. One answer. I should have at least 10 answers. There's a lot of people watching. Yahweh's temple. Thank you. That's mailbox. That's what it says. Father's Joy says God Old Covenant Temple. You're very specific, Father's Joy. Why did you say the Father's Old Covenant Temple? Why didn't you say the New Testament Temple? I am interested. Why didn't you say the New Testament Temple of Christ? How come? Why did you choose that? You are right, by the way. You are correct 100%. But you see, you came up with a conclusion that the text itself does not supply, but you would not arrive at any other conclusion if you are following this text. But that's a very good conclusion that you came to. Because he now has a living temple which is spiritual. Right? The temple of Christ, the temple of the Father under the new heavens and the new earth is not a physical temple that you can take your seat in. Right? It's a spiritual temple, it's a spiritual house. First Peter chapter 2, Ephesians chapter 2. So the only way that the man of lawlessness can take his seat in God's temple is under God's old covenant temple, because the new covenant temple is not a physical structure. Now, the reason I ask this is this. And I asked a friend of mine, a pastor friend of mine. He told me, well, but they are going to build a temple in Jerusalem. The third temple is going to be built. I said, okay, let's say that is possible. Let's say God allows that. Let's say the Orthodox Jews of Jerusalem, who totally hate Jesus, build a temple in Jerusalem. Let's say they are able to do that. Let's say they are supported by the foolish Christian Zionists that some of us are. We give them all the money from America and Africa, and let's say they're able to build a temple in Jerusalem, which clearly that temple would not honor Jesus at all, right? Would not accept Jesus as God's sacrifice. In fact, that would be the basis of building that. Let's say that temple was built in 2026 or 27 or 28, I don't know. So the third temple that is built in Jerusalem in our future, would it be God's temple in any sense? Would God recognize it as his temple? Would God authorize the Levites that would be assigned to serve in that temple? The God of heaven, the God of the Bible, would he say, that's my temple? Would he receive animal sacrifices from it? Would he accept the high priest chosen by the Orthodox Jews in the future of 2026 as a legitimate biblical high priest? Not at all, right, Father Joy? Not at all. So therefore, in the context of the New Testament, could Paul, looking at the 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, because they are saying the second coming is going to happen in 2032, so it has to happen within like this year, really, 2026, for it to fit in with the 3.5 years at the very least. If Jesus is coming in 2032, this temple has to be built latest by 2027, right? According to the 2032 dates, the dates that keep shifting. But anyway, it would not even be God's temple, because it would be the temple. It would be just a temple like the mosque in Jerusalem or the Kaaba in Mecca. It would be a temple just like the Hindu temples. It would not be God's temple, because the temple in Jerusalem was God's temple, because at its inception, at its rebuilding, God sent a verified prophet to sanctify it. Ezra, Solomon, right? So it would not be God's temple. So can that not God's temple fulfill this text in 2 Thessalonians? Can you see that when you're careful, you realize that 2 Thessalonians can only be fulfilled before 70 AD and not a moment later? Because God's physical temple, which was authorized and sanctified and occupied by God, was destroyed in 70 AD. Already the Holy Spirit of God the Father was already sanctifying and occupying the already getting constructed temple of the church. And the promise was that at the second coming, the Father and the Son were going to move into the second coming temple, or the second coming temple, or the third temple, which is the church. So God himself moved out of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD. So 2 Thessalonians cannot be fulfilled a single day after September 70 AD. Because any temple built in 2026, 27, 28 would not be God's temple. For it to be God's temple, God would have to dwell in it and receive sacrifices in it. For there to be an abomination of desolation, because abomination of desolation means that God's presence desolates the place, leaves the place empty. That's what it means for desolation. Desolation means emptiness. And abomination of desolation is a filthiness, a defilement of God's presence, which causes God to leave the holy place, the Holy of Holies. So, even if there was a physical third temple built in Jerusalem, it would never qualify to be God's temple. God's spirit would never dwell in it. Therefore, it would never fulfill the particulars of the prophecy. Now, if you're a futurist and you're watching this, I want to challenge you by saying this. I grew up, I was trained as a pastor, as a futurist. I taught futurism for 11 years of my pastorate to begin with. So I am not saying these things as an opposer of futurism who comes from left field, who does not understand what you teach and what you believe. I was in it. I was part of you. And the only reason I came out of it is when I began to reason together with God in his word to say, wait a minute, God, 2 Thessalonians must happen in your temple, God. You must already dwell in that temple, God. When the man of lawlessness enters that temple and proclaims himself to be God, you already need to be occupying that temple. For it to be defiled, it must already be your residence. And even when I was a futurist, I knew that the third temple built by Jews and Muslims was never going to be God's temple. It was going to be a temple for the Antichrist, according to the teaching I had believed in. So there cannot be an abomination of desolation in Mecca. There cannot be an abomination of desolation in Taj Mahal. There cannot be an abomination of desolation in the Mormon temple in Washington, D.C., because God does not dwell there to begin with. For there to be an abomination of desolation, there must be a defiling of the sacrificial system of God. It is God's system that must be defiled. Verse 11. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination of this that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Now, look at what happens in the book of Mark. Mark 13. Mark 13. And I want you to pay attention to what Mark is going to say is happening at the temple. Notice that in Mark, as he sat on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him, tell us, when will these things be? What will be the signs when all these are about to be accomplished? What things? Well, that is to be found in verse number 1 and 2. The disciples say to him, look, teacher, what wonderful stones. What wonderful buildings. They are not joking. The temple was a wonderful place because God's presence was there ultimately. And Jesus said to him, do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. So they ask him, when? When will this happen? What will be the sign when these things are about to be accomplished? So he begins to give them all these signs. And then when you get to verse number 14, he says, Jesus says, but when you, he's talking to the four. You've been given their names. The you here is the four. But when you see the abomination of desolation spoken or standing, not spoken, standing where he ought not to be. When you see the abomination of desolation standing where he does not deserve to be in God's temple, that is, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. This had to happen by 70 AD. This happened by 70 AD because the last days of the Bible were in the last days of the sacrificial system. The sacrificial system is at the center of the last days. Unfortunately, most pastors, most Christians are not even taught to think through the scriptures, even in Bible school. So you just follow what is trending rather than actually thinking, wait a minute, end of what? Why is it ending? Why did Jesus come to establish a new temple if there was already another temple in Jerusalem? That is so amazing what you just said there. Most of us do not realize the magnificence and the grandeur of God's old covenant temple. I heard it was a sight to behold. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. You could see the temple shining from Egypt. And Egypt is quite a distance away from Jerusalem, because it had these marble stones that would shine when the sun hit them. It was such a magnificent temple. It was a glorious temple. But what made it most glorious? God's presence. God's presence is what, not all the gold, not all the marble, and it was a rich temple. In fact, when General Titus, who later on became the emperor of Rome, came to Jerusalem, he did everything in his power, according to Josephus, not to destroy it. He kept pleading, he kept sending emissaries to the Jews, say, please, your temple is amazing. We don't have to go to the end. Just surrender and I'll go home. But the Jews would not surrender. So let me go back to this question, which is in by Father's Joy. Father's Joy asks, who is the prince in Daniel 9:26? So let me go back here to Daniel 9. I will answer your question real quick. In Daniel 9, in order to understand who the prince is in verse 26, you have to begin reading at verse 24. And if you come into this text without any preconceived idea, no presuppositions, read it as if it's the first time you are reading it, and read it the way you read any grammar. Okay? Don't introduce any character unless the text warrants it. So don't come in with an antichrist in your mind. Don't come in with a Messiah in your mind. Let the text inform you. Okay? So we are going to read it here from verse 24. Let's just go step by step. 70 weeks are decreed about your people as Israel and your holy city, that's Jerusalem. So the 70 weeks have to do with what? Israel and Jerusalem. 70 weeks do not have to do with America or with the modern world. It has to do with Israel and Jerusalem. To finish the transgression, that's the transgression of the law. It's a particular transgression, is the transgression of the law of Moses. Very thing Jesus came to die for. To put an end to sin according to the law. To atone for iniquity according to the law. To bring in everlasting righteousness as compared to the righteousness that is by the law. Philippians 3. To seal both vision and prophet. And to anoint a most holy place. The last thing here says that the 70 weeks also have to do with anointing, establishing a new most holy place, a different one. Remember, at the end of this one, the temple is going to be destroyed. So God already knows this, so he's going to establish a new one, a new dwelling place for God. The most holy place was God's dwelling place. So he's going to establish a new one in the last days of the old one. A good planner builds the new house before demolishing the old one, so that the last day of the old one is the first day of the new one. Hopefully it makes sense. So let's go to verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem and the temple. Because remember, Daniel has been praying, Lord, have mercy on us. Daniel is in exile. The temple is in ruins. Daniel is praying for a restoration, not only of the economic and political activity of Jerusalem, but more importantly, the covenantal and spiritual activity of Jerusalem, because that's the center of the power of God's people. Without a temple, without a priesthood, and without sacrifices, there is no power. There is no wealth. There is no peace. So that's what Daniel has been praying for through from verse 1 up to verse 23 of Daniel 9. So he says, from the time that the decree is given to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one. Now watch the words that are going to be used here in the ESV. A prince, not the. Pay attention to the definite articles. In English grammar, and this is an English translation, we always use a when we are introducing a character in a story. We always use the when the character already exists within the story. Simple, right? So here he introduces a prince. So until the coming of an anointed one, a prince. Now, there is no controversy for anyone that this is talking about the Messiah, Jesus Christ. At least for the most part. There's a few people who have another idea, but for the most part, most people agree this is talking about Jesus. So there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks, it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. So verse 25 tells you that from the time the decree is given until the Messiah comes, there are 7 weeks and 62 weeks, a total of 69 weeks, a total of 483 years. Here, the word that is used is 7 sevens or 77s. So everything has to be multiplied by 7 because it's jubilees. It is Sabbath years. Every Sabbath year is a day. Every 7 years is a week. So 70 weeks are 70 times 7, which is 490 years. 69 weeks, which demarcate the time the decree is given to rebuild the temple and the coming of the Messiah, is 483 years. For your notes, we know that the year that Artaxerxes in Ezra chapter 7 gave the decree is 457 BC. From 457 BC, if you go forward 483 years, it brings you to the year between 27 and 28 AD. The exact time that Jesus was baptized and presented as the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world by John the Baptist, the one who was sent to prepare the way and to announce him. So this prophecy is so specifically explicit that it brings you from the time the decree was given in 457 BC to the day Jesus was baptized. 69 weeks are gone on the day Jesus is baptized in Matthew chapter 3 and Luke 4. Now, verse 26. After the 69 weeks, so the 62 weeks, remember, includes the 7 weeks that were there at the beginning. So, therefore, this sentence ought to be read more accurately. And after the 69 weeks, which means after the baptism of Jesus, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. So that part is talking about the crucifixion of Christ 3.5 years later. Are we together so far? So we have gone from 7 to 62 makes 69. Messiah has appeared at his baptism 27 to 28 AD at the 69th week. After the 69, and notice the word after the 62 weeks, the anointed one shall be cut off shall have nothing. And the people of the prince, actually, I wanted to highlight that. Remember the English grammar rules, which are also in the Greek and the Hebrew. And the people of the prince. Which one? Which prince? The people of the prince who is to come. The people of the prince who is to come. Now, who is this? Now, remember, Father's joy, and I want you to answer this just honestly. So far, without adding anything, without adding salt or sugar, who is the prince who is to come? So far, by the text. According to the text, who is the prince who is to come, and when is he to come, and where is he to come? Don't add anything. Don't bring in ideas preconceived. Let the text determine who the prince that is to come is. If I was telling you a story and I said, a man came round the corner and the young boys started to run away. Then in the next sentence, if I say, the man started chasing after them. If I ask you at that point in an English grammar question, who is this man that is chasing the teenagers? Would you immediately say, well, that seems to be another man? That must be a policeman. That must be ICE. No. Wait a minute. I started by telling you, a man came round the corner. The teenagers looked up and saw him. The teenagers started running away. The man started running after them. Could the man be a different man from a man that came around the corner in the narrative? That would be absurd. You'd have to say, well, let's go back in the story and see if there was another man that had already been introduced in the story. The text starts at verse 24. It tells you in verse 26, 25 that there is a prince. This is the only prince in the whole story. He is to come when the decree is given. The coming of a prince. So when you come to the people of the prince who is to come, why would you go to another individual? He's the Antichrist. Was the prophecy about the Antichrist? Where did the Antichrist idea come from? There is no Antichrist here. That's called eisegesis. When you come with an idea already in your mind and you insert it into the text, ignoring what the author is saying. Exactly. So, even if your translation says a prince, which is probably the New King James Version, still, you have to ask yourself, is there already a prince introduced in the story? When you read fairy tales, Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, and it introduced the prince or a prince at the. Is there any time that when they talk about a prince, you'll just out of nowhere say that must be another prince? I mean, every narrative has its characters. You have already been told who the prince is or which prince this is, and then you're told the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So, according to Josephus and many historians, the reason and the cause of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem was the rebellion of the Jews. If the Jews had not rebelled and killed Roman soldiers, and if the Jews had not refused emphatically and vehemently all the overtures that Titus made towards them, Jerusalem, the temple would still be standing today. So therefore, Josephus clearly says it is the Jews and their leaders who are solely responsible for the destruction of the city and the temple. Josephus says that the destruction of the temple was a punishment against the Jews by God because of their wickedness, because of the abominations they performed in the temple. Titus himself is quoted saying, I did not do this. Their God did this to them. Their God punished them. So you say here, thanks so much, Pastor Steve. This is so helpful. I'm still confused about the 62 weeks in verse 26. All right, let's go back to verse 26. Now, again, before you go to the 62 weeks in verse 26, you have to begin in verse 25. Because remember, how many weeks are there in total? It's a whole narrative, it's a whole framework. It begins with 70 weeks. So understand that you begin with 70 weeks. So the 62 weeks, the 69 weeks don't occur independently, right? You begin with saying, okay, I have 70 weeks. That's all I have. So it's like those arithmetic problems we used to have. Jim has 6 apples and 2 oranges, and then you're given a problem. How many oranges? You do those problems with your kids if you have kids all the time, right? I know I do. So you have 70 weeks to begin with. Okay. Now, when you come to verse 25, it says, know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. And what I want you to do, don't put a full stop there. There are no full stops in Hebrew and Greek. This is put by your English translator. So take away the full stop. Put a comma if you like. There shall be 7 weeks, then for 62 weeks it shall be built again. Take away that, whatever it's called, punctuation mark. Punctuation marks can change the meaning of a sentence. So what you're being told is that from the time the decree is given until the anointed one comes, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Why does he divide the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks is very important. Why he divides the 7 weeks from the 62 is extremely important. Extremely. If you don't understand that part, that's why it will confuse you when you get to verse 26. Let me explain why there is a division between the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks. Now, let's go back to verse 24. It says 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city. Okay? 70 weeks. Now we know that these 70 weeks, or I shall show shortly, the 70 weeks have to do with Sabbath years and jubilees. If you don't know that already, please take out your notebook right now, because I'm going to give you a whole lot of information that you must understand in order to understand what is happening here. Now, in order to understand it, you go back to verse number 2 of Daniel 9. When you get to verse number 2, you find that Daniel tells you something very important that helps you to figure out where all this is coming from. So let's go to verse number 2. Okay. In verse number 2, it says, in the first year of the reign of Darius, in verse number 1, hopefully I don't have to go back to verse number 1 to prove that. In the reign of Darius, I, Daniel, perceived in the books. And by the way, these are the same books you will find in Revelation 20. I perceived, I understood, I comprehended in the books of the law, that is, the number of years that, according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah, the prophet, must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So this is where the whole story begins. Most people start reading the 70 weeks from verse 24. You must not do that. you must begin the reading of the 70 weeks from verse number 2. Because verse number 2 tells you that Daniel was concerned about the 70 years. Daniel was given the prophecy of the 70 weeks based off of his comprehension and Bible study that brought him to the understanding of the 70 years. When he understood the 70 years, he fell on his knees. When he comprehended the 70 years, he began to cry. The cry out of the 70 years led to the prophecy of the 70 weeks. So can you see that the 70 weeks cannot be understood outside of the 70 years? Because it is the 70 years comprehension that led to a plea to God that produced the 70 weeks. So what were the 70 years about? In order to understand them, he says here that the word about the 70 years was given to Jeremiah. Right? So now I'm going to do this. Let me just open up another one. So let's go understand the 70 years for a moment. 70 years are the basis for 70 weeks. Write that down. 70 years of captivity are the basis for 70 weeks. 70 years of captivity are the basis for the 70 weeks. Which means if you miss the meaning of the 70 years, you will not even understand how the 70 weeks work or why they are divided into 7 and 62 and 1. It's not random. There's a system here. So let's go back to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter number 36. Last chapter. So this one, you don't even have to memorize it. Just know the last book of Chronicles, the last record of the kings of Judah. That's where you'll find the prophecy. Also, it's found in Jeremiah 25. But this one is easy to remember because Jeremiah 25, you can always forget. I'm just giving you the system by which I remember things. Because people will say, how do you remember all these things? I try to have a system. Okay, what do I associate this with so that every time I need to remember it, 2 Chronicles ends the record of the kings. So in 2 Chronicles, which we'll talk about Judah's decline, I don't want to read the whole thing. So I want to go to the place that I'm going to be told what happened to this place. Let's read, begin at verse 7. Nebuchadnezzar also carried part of the vessels of the house of the Lord. Remember, Daniel 9:24 is telling you about the restoration of the temple, the restoration of the sacrifices. So this is where they had ended, the beginning of the 70 years. So Nebuchadnezzar carried the vessels of the house of the Lord to Babylon and put them in his palace in Babylon. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim and the abominations that he did and what was found against him, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel, of Judah, and Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his place. Okay. Now I'm going to skip this part here. I was just giving you the context. So I want to go to the 70 years. Okay, so let's begin here. Zedekiah did what was evil in the sight of the Lord his God. He did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke from the mouth of the Lord. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by God. He stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against turning to the Lord, the God of Israel. Okay, so now we know what is happening generally. Judah is about to come to an end. Judah is about to go to captivity. Now, it says here, all the officers of the priests and the people likewise were exceedingly unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations, and they polluted the house of the Lord that he had made holy in Jerusalem. The Lord, the God of their fathers, sent persistently to them by his messengers because he had compassion on his people. You know, people always tell you, oh, the God of the Old Testament is so cruel. He is so unfeeling. We like Jesus. Jesus is so soft and kind. People who say that have never read the Old Testament. Look at the love of God. He says God sent persistently to them by his messengers, his prophets, because of his compassion on his people. and on his dwelling place. But they kept mocking the messengers of God, despising his words, and scoffing at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people. So was God cruel and unkind and unmerciful? No. He did this for hundreds of years before finally he reached the limit. Like, I have to do something about this. I can't continue tolerating this wickedness. So the Lord's wrath rose against his people until there was no remedy. Therefore, he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, and he destroyed them all to the last man, right? Because he's a cruel, cruel God, right? No, what he does. Watch what he does. He sent them against the king of the Chaldeans, Nebuchadnezzar, who killed their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, the place of the crime scene, and had no compassion on young men or virgin or old men or aged. He gave them all into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. And all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his princes, all these he brought to Babylon. So he didn't destroy them. He preserved them. Mercy. And they burned the house of God and broke down the wall of Jerusalem and burned all its palaces with fire, destroyed all its precious vessels. He took into exile in Babylon those who had escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and to his sons until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbath. So you need to understand that this is what Daniel understood. When Daniel was reading Jeremiah 25 and 2 Chronicles, he now understood, because Daniel was a very young man when they came into captivity. He may not have fully understood why I'm a righteous man. I keep the law of God. Why am I having to go into captivity myself? So it says here, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. Remember, Sabbath is seventh day. All the days that it lay desolate, it, the land, kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So when Daniel understood this, that the reason they were in captivity was because the land needed to enjoy its prescribed Sabbaths, he began to pray. So in Daniel 9, Daniel is saying, God, give us another chance. And if you give us another chance, we will keep the Sabbath this time. So why did the children of Israel go into captivity for 70 years? Because they had neglected to keep the Sabbath for 70 times. So they are given 70 weeks because they had neglected the Sabbath 70 times. So they go into captivity 70 times so that the land can keep the Sabbath. So God gives them a new calendar of 70 times. And if they keep it, then he would send the Messiah at the end of the 70 times. Did what I just said there make sense? If it did not, it will soon make sense. Go. So in other words, in order to understand the law of Sabbath years and why Israel had to go to captivity for exactly 70 years, 70 times, you need to go back to Leviticus 25, because it is the law of Leviticus 25 that had been broken. So let's go back to Leviticus 25. Leviticus 25 is the basis of Daniel's 70 weeks. Please note that. Leviticus 25 is the basis and the operational manual for 70 weeks. The 70 weeks are counted according to Leviticus 25. The calendar for the 7 weeks are governed by Leviticus 25. So let's go there. So in Leviticus 25, you are given the calendar for the Sabbath years for the land, not for the people. Remember, the people keep the Sabbath every 7 days. The land keeps the Sabbath every 7 years. That's the difference. Now watch. So it will say here the Sabbath year. That's the title of Leviticus 25. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you. So notice the location of this law. This law can only be kept when you come into the land. So this law was never kept during the 40 years of captivity. This law cannot be kept outside of the land and outside of the temple. This law is governed by the land and the temple existing, the dwelling place. So when you come to the land that I give you, the land, not the people, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. No agriculture in the 7th year. It's a Sabbath year, 1 whole year, 12 months. No agriculture, no planting. You shall not reap what grows of itself in your harvest, or gather the grapes of your undressed vine. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. The Sabbath of the land shall provide food for you yourself, and for your male and female servants, and for your hired worker and the sojourner who lives with you, and for your cattle and for your wild animals that are in your land. All its yield shall be for food. You shall count 7 weeks of years. So this part is very important to understand why he divides the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks. Because this is how you count jubilees. You shall count 7 weeks of years as 49 years. 7 times 7 years. So that the time of 7 weeks of years shall give you 49 years. Then you shall sound the trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement, you shall sound the trumpet throughout all your land, and you shall consecrate the 50th year. So in other words, the calendar of Israel works on jubilees. So you must count the first 7 weeks fast. That simply announces the jubilee cycles have begun. You won't stop doing what you do. You're just saying this is how the calendar begins. The calendar begins by counting 49 years. Then you consecrate the 50th year. And then you start counting again. 7 times 7, 49 years. You consecrate the 50th year. 7 times 7, 49 years. You consecrate the 50th year. The 50th year is called the year of Jubilee. In the 50th year, you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants. Remember when Jesus comes in Luke chapter 4 and says, I have come to declare, I've come to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. Luke chapter 4. Remember that? You've read it many times. To proclaim liberty for the captives, the restoration of sight to the blind, good news to the poor. Jesus is declaring it's time for Jubilee. 49 years are gone. It's the 50th year. That's what Jesus came to proclaim. Jesus came to proclaim that the 70 weeks are at an end. I have come to fulfill what was promised in Daniel chapter 9. Anyway, it shall be a jubilee for you when each of you shall return to his property, his inheritance. And each of you shall return to his clan. Notice that the language of the second coming is being gathered together to the Lord. Inheritance. Ephesians chapter 1. Back into the land, back to the promises. Liberation, freedom, salvation, new heavens, new earth, eternal inheritance. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of itself, nor gather the grapes from the undressed vine, for it is a jubilee, it shall be holy to you. You may eat the produce of the field. In this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his property. And you shall, if you make a sale to your neighbor to buy, or buy from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. You shall pay your neighbor according to the number of years after the jubilee, and so on. You can read that for yourself. So now, let me explain now here. This is now important. So every 7th year, the land was to be allowed to rest. Sabbath, every 7th year. Cultivate 6 years, rest 1 year. Cultivate 6 years, rest 1 year. In the 49th year, which was a Sabbath year, the land was to rest in the 49th year and in the 50th year. So at the time of the Jubilee, the land was resting 2 years in a row. But in the 50th year, all debts, every single debt was to be released. It doesn't matter how much anyone owed you. You restored everything. You restored their land. Everybody who had lost land because they were poor, because there was bad weather, they received back their land. So that the 50th year was the year of reset. It was the year of reformation, as it were. Reset. The reset button was hit in the 50th year for everyone. What a beautiful and glorious system. So that if you made some mistakes in judgment, or just things did not go your way, and you lost your property because you could not maintain it, at the 50th year, your son, or you yourself, you are still alive, received back what had been given to your father originally. So that throughout history, Israelites would never come to a place where they completely lost their inheritance. The inheritance would always be restored. Wow. Right? So now, enter David. How many of you love King David? Love him to death, right? So from the time of Moses until the time of King David, the Israelites kept the law of Jubilees. Well, from the time of Joshua, really, because Moses never entered the land. From the time of Joshua, when Joshua entered the land, all the way until the reign of King David, even through the reign of King Saul, they kept the Sabbath years and the Jubilees diligently. But from the time King David became king, they stopped keeping the Sabbath years. We are not told why. The way we know that they stopped keeping the Sabbath years is because God said in the time of Zedekiah, you all must go away from the land for as long as you have not kept the Sabbath years. 70 times you have not kept it. Therefore, 70 times you will be away. Now, if you take 70 times, you have to say every 7 years, 70 times they did not keep it. So from the time of the captivity in 587 BC, you need to count 70 times 7. That's 490 years. They had not kept the Sabbath. You take 490 years from 587 BC, you end up around 1070, 1060, maybe 1080 AD, exactly when King David was king. So from the time of King David, followed by his son King Solomon, followed by the son of King Solomon, Rehoboam, going forward, they did not keep the Sabbath years. For 490 years, they did not keep the Jubilees. Therefore, it means that from the time of King David, there was no reset being hit every 50 years. In fact, there was no mini reset being hit every 7th year, because there was a mini reset every 7 years. And then in the 49th year, there would be a trumpet blown. Next year is the great reset every 50 years. So you can imagine that for 10 jubilees, remember a jubilee is 50 years, for 10 jubilees, 500 years, they did not observe the Sabbath years. So God now comes. He had been sending prophets saying, you need to keep the Sabbath. The Sabbath is most important. But they did not do it. So when the time came, God says, for the exact same amount of years that you have not kept the Sabbath years, you must go away from my land. The land must rest for 70 times 7 weeks. They never release the captives because you cannot release the captives if there is no jubilee. So there were people who had been slaves. By the way, do you remember the Gibeonites, the people of Ai and all that? And there's a drought for 3 years and nobody knows what is going on. They are not keeping the Sabbath years. Because when David came in, he's a man after God's own heart, but David does not understand the law very well. He does not understand the purpose of the law. So he is taking somebody else's wife. All this stuff is happening. And you read the book of Kings and you just find most of the kings, they would rule and die without ever reading the book of the law. And then a new king would come in like Josiah and he would say, find me that book. And they would look for it for weeks and then find it, and he would read it a few moments and he would start crying. So, oh my God, what have we done? And then he would try to keep it up. And then when he died, his son would hide the book, not keep it for a few generations. So they were going through these cycles where they were not forgiving one another. They were not keeping the Sabbath years. They were not releasing the captives. They were not resetting. That's why in Jesus' time, Peter asked Jesus. He asked him a very loaded question. Jesus, how often should I forgive my brother? Yes, they were eating the showbread and all that. How often should I forgive my brother? Now, many of you have had this question, right? 70 times, 7 times. Have you ever related it to Leviticus 25? How often should I forgive my brother? Well, 70 times 7. It's 490. 50 jubilees. That's what Jesus answers. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to execute the 50th jubilee so that we can do away with this system, because this system, no one can keep it. So, for 500 years, 490 years really, 490 Sabbaths, well, 70 Sabbaths really, to be exact, right? For 70 Sabbaths, the children of Judah did not keep the Sabbath years. For 500 years straight, they did not keep the Sabbath years. Therefore, they did not observe the jubilees. They did not release the captives. So God says you must go away as captives for 70 years. So now Daniel comes to that realization. He comes to, in the charismatic circles, we say, he comes to that revelation. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived. Mind blown. His mind is open. Oh, so this is why we are in captivity. For 500 years, we did not keep the Sabbath law. So what does he do? Then I turned my face to the Lord my God. Now understand the heaviness of the prayer. Because have you never wondered, why is he crying so much? I mean, you've been here for 70 years, Daniel. I turned my face, the Lord my God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy. With fasting and sackcloth and ashes, I prayed to the Lord my God and made confession, say, oh Lord, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. We have sinned and done wrong and acted wickedly. Can you imagine if Daniel had realized this before the 70 years? Can you imagine? Now, Jeremiah knew this. Jeremiah tried to plead with the people, but they would not listen to him. So he says, for 70 years, we are going away, all of us, the whole nation. We've acted wickedly, we have rebelled, we have turned aside from your commandments and rules, we have not listened to your servants, the prophets who spoke in your name to our kings for 500 years. For five, is God cruel, really? 500 years he sent prophets? America has not even existed for 500 years, has it? As a nation. They would not listen to the prophets for 500 years straight. And our fathers and all our people, to you, O Lord, belongs the righteousness, but to us, open shame, as at this day. To the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and all Israel, and all who are near, and those who are far away, in all the lands to which you have driven them, because of the treachery that they have committed against you. Now, if you are studying the 70 weeks, and you have no inkling of this, are you even trying to understand what the 70 weeks are about? Are you even trying to understand what the 70 weeks are about? No. You're just trying to make a calendar. 70 weeks, 2032. It's about the law in Leviticus. Is it any wonder that when the Jews came back from captivity, what is the most important thing to a Jew from the time of the exile coming back? In the New Testament, what are the Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, what are they concerned about with one mind? You can do anything else, we'll let you go. You can even commit adultery, and if we bring you to Jesus and he gives good reason, we will let you go. But what is the one thing that you could not survive in the time of Jesus? Why was Jesus crucified? Well, he was crucified for calling himself God, but for the most part is because of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is the greatest argument of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He healed on the Sabbath. He did this on the Sabbath. The Sabbath became the main laser focus of all the Jews because they understood the reason we went into captivity was the Sabbath. We will never play again with the Sabbath. That's the one thing you could not play with, the Sabbath. So in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, remember they had neglected 70 weeks of Sabbaths, which if you want to know how long it is, you must multiply it by 7, which makes it 490 years. So when God hears the prayer of Daniel, look at what God does. So in verse number 20, right? In verse number 20, while I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and the presenting my plea before the Lord my God for the holy hill. He was pleading for the holy hill of my God. The law, Leviticus, pleading for Leviticus. While I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the first, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. He made me understand, speaking with me, saying, "Oh, Daniel, I have now come to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your pleas for mercy, pertaining to the 70 years which came out of the 70 weeks, a word went out, and I have now come to tell to you, for you are greatly loved. Therefore, consider the word and understand the vision. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city." Now, if you already understand what I've been saying, so they are being given a second set of 70 weeks. They are being given a second set of 500 years in which they must observe the Sabbath years religiously without missing a single Sabbath year. Right? And if they keep these Sabbath years, at the end of these 70 weeks, God will send them a Messiah who will bring that whole system to an end. So that should already inform you that the 70 weeks are 70 weeks of keeping Sabbath years within the land of Israel. And they cannot be skipped, because every Sabbath that you skip accrues exile. Every Sabbath year that you skip accrues years away in exile. So this idea that people say, Well, the 69th week, Jesus was crucified and God paused. And now the 70th week is going to happen 2,000 years later. It means that once you skip 2,000 years of Sabbath years, first and foremost, they must be repaid by exile for as many years as you have skipped it. So, it makes no sense to have a gap. You cannot have a gap. The reason for the Sabbath years is that they must be kept consecutively. It's Sabbath years in the land, jubilees in the land. So they must be kept while the temple is standing. There are no more jubilees after 70 AD. The law of jubilees ended when the law ended in 70 AD. So now, why did he say here in verse number 25, know therefore and understand, from the going out of the word to restore Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed, there shall be 7 weeks first. He's saying you must first count the first jubilee, the first complete jubilee, so that it will be, it's like setting the clock, the stopwatch. 7 weeks, 49 years. Okay, we've started. Now let's move on. Add the 62. The 7 weeks is just a calendar announcement. The calendar has started counting again. So the calendar stopped when the temple was destroyed and when the people were taken out of the land. The calendar starts again when the temple starts operating again. And the calendar must be kept consecutively so long as the temple stands, so long as the Levitical order stands, so long as the animal sacrificial stand. You must not skip a year, because you skip a year, you go into captivity for as many years as you skip. The 70 weeks have no gaps because they must be fulfilled according to the letter of the law. So the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks are separated, not because they are separate events, but rather because the first 7 weeks indicate the first cycle of the jubilees. So in other words, if you go back here to Leviticus, it tells you how you calculate them, right? You remember that? It says, you shall count 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7, so that at the time of the 7 weeks of years, it shall give you 49 years. Then you shall sound the trumpet. So in other words, here when Ezra was given the decree by Artaxerxes and they went for 49 years, when they blew that trumpet, now they had kept one jubilee, and now they were to keep 9 more to the end of the 70 weeks, because there are 10 jubilees which represent the 10 commandments, which represent the law to the end. That's why no matter how you count it, the 70 weeks cannot go beyond 70 AD. In fact, the 70 weeks ended in 34 AD because you cannot skip. There is no skipping. There's no skipping of the 70 weeks. Because if you keep, remember, they skipped from the time of King David to the time of King Zedekiah. They went away for 70 years. You cannot skip a single year. That's how the law works. So, do you now see, this is, of course, I did not anticipate that we were going to be talking about this today, but does this explanation explain my title? Because my title says the end times must be understood, cannot be understood outside of understanding the Old Covenant. Without Leviticus 25, you have no idea what is happening with the 70 weeks of Daniel. Daniel himself understands the 70 weeks by looking at Jeremiah. Jeremiah says, I'm talking about the 70 weeks in Leviticus 25. Jesus died to fulfill Daniel 70 weeks. That's why Daniel 70 weeks come to their completion 3.5 years after the death and the resurrection of Christ. At the killing of Stephen, the 70 weeks were complete. Now what was left was a period of judgment between 34 AD and 70 AD. Let me see if there are questions that I missed here. So, earlier on, required mailbox, which means they were holding people in slavery to death. Yes, they were. And that's the whole issue of the gospel, right? They withheld God's mercy and love for the people. Yes, they did. And for each other, they did not love each other. That was the whole thing. That's why Jesus comes and says, love one another. That's all I want you to do. Father's Joy says, this teaching is enthralling. Yes, it is, isn't it? It's amazing. You know, Pastor what's his name? Pastor Isaac was saying the other day, from the moment he began to learn these principles, the Bible, even for a pastor, it becomes something else. You're like, oh my goodness, how did I miss all this beauty and splendor and majesty and awesomeness in the Old Testament? I used to think the Old Testament was so boring. Aerosmith asked, so this isn't all just a coincidence? No, I don't think so, Aero. I don't think so. Right. Judson Harrington is here. He says, great explanation of the 70 times 7. Connecting with Peter's question about forgiveness is something I had not connected. Thank you, Pastor. Amen. Forgiveness is release. That's what Jesus was doing at the cross. Aaron says, what seems clear to me is that we have such a different mindset than the Old Covenant people had. It is easier to see why so many modern Christians don't see the fulfillment when we see how differently we think. Yes, because number one, we are thieves of promises as a people. Modern Christians are thieves of promises. We steal the promises of Israel. We don't want to understand what they are based on. All the promises of God are for us, forgiveness, adoption, all of them. But we don't want to understand how they actually work. Because if we actually understood how they worked, we would not say God is going to fulfill those promises to us in the future. We would say, oh my goodness, he fulfilled it to them in the past. We are their descendants. We are the descendants of the blessed of the Lord, as in Isaiah 65. The first century was the time of fulfillment. We are the descendants 50 years later, 50 generations later. Not 50 years, 50 generations later. So it is imperative that we get ourselves, by the grace of God, to start thinking from an old covenant point of view. Not to start living from an old. You don't need to live like an Old Testament person. You need to understand the scriptures from their perspective, because that's the perspective in which God made these promises. So that when you think about resurrection, what is resurrection? Don't think about resurrection in the modern Greek philosophy, American, Western type of thinking. Because then you start thinking of people coming out of physical graves, which the Old Testament person never thought about death like that, resurrection like that. When they think about the Satan or the Antichrist or what people call hell, they are not thinking the way we think. But their thinking is the correct thinking. Ours is totally inaccurate. Ours twists the word of God, makes it of no effect. Amen. So, any other questions? Any other questions? Pastor Ben Gaido, it's good to see you. Brother Sami Osh, great to see you. And all of you that have joined in this broadcast. So I'm going to wait here. If there are any other questions, I'm going to answer them. But I think that will be it for this edition of Ask the Pastor. And while I'm waiting for questions, if there be any, I want you guys to pay attention to this. And those of you who can, what I've just shared here tonight is just a little tidbit of what you will receive and what you will be experiencing if you join us for this very, very awesome event. And this is what I'm talking about.
In 2026, a doorway opens, a gateway into the heart of biblical prophecy, and the world is invited. This July 8th through 11th, 2026 in St. Louis, Missouri, the Eschatology of the Prophets Gateway Conference brings together some of the most respected voices in fulfilled prophecy studies, featuring Dr. Don K. Preston, Dr. William Bell Jr., Zach Davis, Pastor Michael Miano, Tim Martin, Pastor Steve Magua, and more guest speakers to be announced. 4 days of revelation, 4 days of powerful teaching, 4 days that will reshape how you understand the prophets from Genesis to Revelation. Only 100 tickets are available, and when they're gone, they're gone. Secure your spot today at www.thewellchurchstl.com/events. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Step through the gateway. More information is available at www.beyondcreationscience.com. July 8th through 11th, 2026, St. Louis, Missouri. The Gateway Conference. Enter the conversation. Experience the revelation.
Don't you just love how that guy says St. Louis? He calls it in the OG style, St. Louis, Missouri. So truly, I believe this is going to be an epic time. We had the most epic time in Montana. This was the eschatology of Genesis in Montana. Aerosmith was there. And he can tell you for a fact we had an amazing time. I believe that it's only going to get better and better. This time, of course, apart from Don Preston, who is just the best teacher that I've seen within us, fulfilled eschatology people, we will have William Bell. We will have Zach Davis again. And man, he bats it out of the field, out of the whole stadium every single time. We have Pastor Michael Miano, wonderful pastor amongst us. We have Tim Martin and myself, right? And others, Pastor Kyle Whitten from Curated Christian. And we still have a few other speakers that we have in mind that are still looking at their schedules. It's going to be awesome. So please, if you can, even if you have to drive. Let's say I was talking to a friend of mine that I made lately here in the fulfilled eschatology world, and they said, I've never been on an airplane. And I said to them, well, I do have friends in North Carolina that are actually taking a road trip. So what about a convoy from North Carolina? It's not far. When I used to drive trucks from North Carolina to St. Louis, 8 hours, 10 hours, I was done. 8 hours, actually. That's what it was, maybe 10. Or get on an airplane for the first time. I remember when I started preaching back in 2008, I have a friend that I made there, and she was one of the ladies that became a very, very instrumental lady in our prayer team and in our evangelism team in Baltimore. And in 2014, I invited her to come for a conference in St. Louis because I'd moved. And she told me, Pastor Steve, I've never been on an airplane in my life. I said, you know what? There's always a first time. And we arranged it. I bought the tickets, got on an airplane, and we had the grandest time. There's a first time for everything. But I promise you, if you're a preterist and you've experienced the kind of things we've experienced, being thrown out of churches, being ostracized, being made to feel as if we don't love the Lord, as if we don't love worship, these are the things. This is not the only conference. There's the April conference in Virginia Beach with Pastor David Curtis. Always awesome. There's a conference going on right now in New Mexico, I believe. And of course, every year we have the conference out in New York. There's a lot of conferences going on that always bring fulfilled eschatology people together. Seems like my computer is lagging. Let me turn off this website that is making it lag. I think that's what was making it lag. Now, if you want to come, if you can put it on your calendar, please talk to us. Even if you are having issues and struggles, you're like, I want to come, but the cost is a little bit limiting. Talk to me. We will do whatever we can. Hey, you can come here, and because I'm not going to be staying at the retreat myself, we want to give that space up for the people who are going to come for the conference. But I have enough space in my house, and I'll be driving there every day. So let's get you here. Come on, let's spend some time in my basement. Let's go fellowship together. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be awesome. And I believe this is just the beginning of a glorious, glorious movement that has been going on, but we feel like it's picking up gear. All right. So if you can, please come out. If you need help financially to get it done, talk to me. Because right now we are actually encouraging people who love this ministry. They love what we are doing. They love Don Preston. They love William Bell. They love Michael. They love Zach Davis. They love Tim. They love me. And they're like, I can't come, but here's $1,000. Here's $2,000. And we will not keep it. We will not put it in our own pockets. We will, every donation we will get, and we've started getting some donations, we will apply to people who say, I really do want to come. And this is the year I want to come. Can you help me? We will do it. We will actually buy some tickets for some people. We will probably have, but towards the end, we'll probably have some games that we will play, and people will win tickets to the conference. Okay. So anyway, let's see what happens. Father's Joy says this: my mind is blown away enough for today. Thank you, Pastor Steve. Father's Joy, where are you located? I don't know that I've seen you before. At least I think this is the first time that I'm seeing your name here on YouTube. I'm pretty sure we probably fellowship in other ways. But Father's Joy also says, our family's praying about saving up for next year's conference. Hopefully, there'll be one next year. Oh, yes. There is certainly going to be a conference next year. And catch the power of this. We are looking to go back to Montana next year. That is the tentative plan. Montana was just something else. I've never experienced such a thing in my life. Montana is one of the most beautiful places on the planet Earth, and I've traveled quite a bit. So we are hoping to be back in Montana. So Father's Joy says we'll be praying for your success of the conference this July. I'm sure it will be wonderful. And of course, guys, if you are not able to come, you will not completely miss out. You will only miss out on the St. Louis pizza. You will miss out on the greatest Chinese food in the world, even in China. Even Chinese come to St. Louis for the Chinese food. But we will record all the sessions, and we will make the sessions available on my on the YouTube channel, and we will make it available also in Covenant Creation on YouTube, which is the Beyond Creation Science YouTube site. So we will make sure that you don't miss out the teachings themselves, the discussions, the Q&As, the breakout sessions, and all that. We will try and make sure that you get it. I see. SPC 3 Studio. That's why I was like, I was sensing this is somebody I know, but I saw SPC 3 Studio. My son shared my YouTube account, but he has his own now. Okay, very good. Very good. Good to know that. So anyway, guys, it's been amazing. It's been awesome. I hope you're blessed. I'm gonna leave it there. If you do want to come to the conference, just go to our website. I'm gonna show it right now. This is our website, the Whale Church, thewhalechurchstl.com. thewhalechurchstl.com. Let me see if I have a banner for that. I think I do. Let me just make sure about that. If I do, I'll put it up here in a moment. But if you go to the whalechurchstl.com, I don't think, it doesn't seem like I do. So let me do this. And then I'm going to put it up here also in the banners. Create banner. Paste banner. So here it is. So if you go to this website, which I'm about to put up there, the whalechurchstl.com, Then you go to events, you click on events, it brings you to that page. You click on that button, it takes you to the event itself. It gives you all this information about the event, about the speakers, about St. Louis, about all the things that we'll be doing, exploring St. Louis. Then at the very bottom, it gives you a place to register for the conference. And you can register one of two ways. You can either buy an all-inclusive ticket, which includes lodging, or you can camp, you can bring your RV, you can bring your tent. There is 45 acres of grounds that is going to be free. You will not be charged for camping in those grounds. Or if you want to donate, you can also go down here and you can give gifts towards the conference. Anybody who gives through this website, we know they are giving towards the conference, so we will apply it for anybody that wants to come but cannot afford it for one reason or the other. Okay, so that's how you get to do this. That's how you get to do that. So that's it for today. That's it for today. I don't see any questions, so I want to bid you adieu. Thank you for joining me. I hope you continue to have an awesome Friday evening, an awesome weekend. May the Lord keep you safe, and may you continue to seek His face. May you continue to be a light to those around you, to your neighborhood, to your nation, to your generation, because that is what you are called to do. That's what we are called to do. God bless you abundantly. I love you all in the name of the Lord Jesus.
In 2026, a doorway opens, a gateway into the heart of biblical prophecy, and the world is invited. This July 8th through 11th, 2026 in St. Louis, Missouri, the Eschatology of the Prophets Gateway Conference brings together some of the most respected voices in fulfilled prophecy studies, featuring Dr. Don K. Preston, Dr. William Bell Jr., Zach Davis, Pastor Michael Miano, Tim Martin, Pastor Steve Magua, and more guest speakers to be announced. 4 days of revelation, 4 days of powerful teaching, 4 days that will reshape how you understand the prophets from Genesis to Revelation. Only 100 tickets are available, and when they're gone, they're gone. Secure your spot today at www.thewellchurchstl.com/events. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Step through the gateway. More information is available at www.beyondcreationscience.com. July 8th through 11th, 2026, St. Louis, Missouri. The Gateway Conference. Enter the conversation. Experience the revelation.